Hello, stationery friends. It's the Canada Day long weekend here, and I'll be doing a bit of a stationery celebration or ode to Canada Day in my own unique way. Not sure why I'm rhyming. I'll also be switching out my BENU fountain pen from a medium nib to a fine nib, and then I'll be talking about a few different stationery updates in my toolkit that I've been debating as of late, and perhaps quick look at some of the summer books that I have picked up recently. Before we begin, I have to apologize. I am terrible with social media. I do have an Instagram account, and I just discovered a feature because my notifications setting got reset on my phone recently. Long story short, there was a few folks who were trying to reach out to me via Instagram, via the messaging side of it, which I didn't even really know about. I didn't know that was possible. And I forgot a few folks in responding to them. That wasn't my intent, and I do apologize. Now that I've discovered that feature, I will do a bit better of a job to check Instagram a bit more frequently, especially on the messaging side. And if you do want to get a hold of me, stationery@gmail.com is perhaps a bit of a better way. I'm a little bit better with email. Generally, I try to stay off my computer when I'm on my free time as much as possible, just because I spend so much of my time in front of the screen and on the computer during my other day job. I suppose being somewhat analog oriented in my entire life, as you can tell by this channel. Yeah, I'm not very good with the social media messaging. Definitely better with emails for sure. Sorry about that, and feel free to reach out to me on Instagram messaging. It might be a little bit of a slow response on my part still, but now I know that feature exists, and I will definitely be checking that out. Canada Day, a really important holiday, obviously, to celebrate this beautiful country that I live in. It's a wonderful, wonderful country, and also because it's one of the first long weekends in the summer months, and of course everybody, myself included, really enjoy having a bit of a break. So I think it's a neat thing to do, to just celebrate on what a beautiful country this is from the perspective of I had grown up basically all over the world, arrived in Canada, and it was interesting for me personally because I had no intentions of staying in the city that I currently reside in, but I met my wife here, and I just really like the fact that I'm literally about an hour away from the Rocky Mountains, and I rediscovered stationery and fountain pens in the city. So lots of family, lots of friends, lots of good connections here, and I am just very grateful to be in this wonderful country. The other thing about Canada is it's just so big. It's so infused with nature. Well, technically nature infused with us, but it's sprawling, and I think the fact that I can get out to the mountains, journal, hike, be out and just celebrate a really lovely country. People are great. Yeah, now I'm trying to sing praises and convince you to come to Canada, but that's my intent. If you're not in Canada, and if you are in Canada, you already know all of this. So I thought it'd be really interesting to do a little bit of a montage clips here from some of my past Journal With Me videos. If you haven't checked those out, feel free to scour the channel for those. But there's really beautiful scenery from some of my camping trips, some of my hiking trips, and where I whipped out my traveler's journal or my journal, and I've just been sitting there taking the beauty in. So we'll do a quick celebration of Canada Day with stationery. If you're also looking for some great Canadian stationery products, I've mentioned this a few times in my current stationery setup. I'm using Pop Olive leather notebook covers. This is the A5 in an English tan and the Hobonichi A6 for my Hobonichi. Anyhow, these are fantastic leather notebooks. Well, I'll put my pen upside down in there. Fantastic leather notebooks and notebook covers, I should say, sorry. They're made by a company out in Nelson, BC. I've talked about them before. If you're interested in finding out more information, click on this link up here. I've talked about my love for this fountain pen. This is a BENU Talisman Tiger's Eye. It was a lovely gift from Kate at BENU earlier on in the year, and I did a video on that in terms of an in-depth, closer look. What I really like about this pen is just it's absolutely gorgeous. I love the detailing. I love how well it writes. And the only little bit of drawback, I suppose, 6 months later, is the fact that I picked a medium nib on the pen when I was ordering it. And for me, I gravitate towards medium for long-form journaling, and particularly European mediums. The medium on this is a Schmidt nib, by the way, that comes with the BENU pen. Writes like a broad, and it's very wet, which is fantastic in terms of getting good characteristics out of your ink. However, it's a little bit too broad for me when I am writing. And so I had some family down in the States who were able to get a replacement nib from Gold Spot Pens down there, and they brought up a fine nib for me. So we're going to jump over to the desk and do a bit of a comparison on the medium versus the fine Schmidt nib from BENU here. So this is kind of crazy. I recorded the intro and I jumped over to my desk to do the nib swap on my BENU pen. And when I was doing the nib swap, as you'll see here, I realized, much to my embarrassment, that I have a broad nib on this pen, even though I ordered a medium nib on the pen, and that's what I thought I had. And the funny thing is, I don't know why I never thought to actually check the nib itself. Perhaps it was lighting, perhaps it was because it was earlier on in the year. It doesn't matter. There's no excuses. Turns out I have a broad nib, which is why it writes like a broad. And that totally makes sense when you put it in that perspective. You'll see there's a moment of hesitation in the next clip here where I switch out to the fine, and I'm confused on why there is such a vast difference in the line variation between, again, what I perceived that is a medium versus the new fine nib. Turns out I was comparing a broad to a fine. I love this pen. It's beautiful detailing. It's really gorgeous. I've got this inked up with the Diamine Oxblood right now. I'm going to do a bit of a writing sample just so you can see. It's nice. I really like it. And this is inked, as I said, with the Diamine, not Oxblood, Writer's Blood. Going to switch over to my black fountain pen ink absorbent cloth. It's just a towel, hand towel, which I repurpose just because I can go through a lot of paper towels and Kleenexes swapping out my inks, as I like to do quite often. What I'm going to do is just undo the converter. Just like that. And for this, you're just going to you're going to hold it gently and unscrew the nib unit from there. That's as simple as it gets. Bit of a wipe. And here is the fine. So I'm just going to screw this back, the fine, make sure. The BENU nibs, by the way, Schmidt nibs again, just to be clear. They come as one complete housing with the nib unit and the feeder. Significantly thinner in line variation here. It's quite fascinating. That's such an interesting experiment, given the fact that there's such a variation between the medium and the fine. Okay, interesting plot twist. So I was trying to figure out why these two are so different between what I thought was a medium nib and the fine nib that I ordered. And here we go. This is the plot twist here. This, in fact, is a broad nib. It says clearly on the nib unit, on the nib itself, B, which is broad. And all this time, I thought I had a medium, because that is what I ordered from BENU. And embarrassingly, this is very embarrassing to admit, I never thought to check. To recap, when I was looking at the variation, it just didn't make any sense to me how you could have such a line variation between the medium to the fine. And of course, it turns out that this is a broad in the BENU here, which probably negates the previous video I did on the BENU pen from the perspective of the nib that I thought I had. So I'm going to reach out to BENU and let them know that I received the wrong nib many months ago, and all this time I just thought I had a medium and wasn't checking. How embarrassing is this for a stationary YouTube channel not to actually check the nib? Man, I don't even know what to say other than wow. So apologies for misinforming you. I do in fact have the BENU pen in a fine now, but previously in a broad, not a medium. So I'm going to see if I can get my hands on a medium and do a proper comparison there. I guess it's good that I finally took a really close look at the nib. I don't understand why I would have not caught that, other than the fact that I just didn't. Holy moly, apologies again for the misinformation, and I will get that corrected in future videos here. In fact, I'm just going to make sure I strike this out right now and clearly say that this is a broad. I apologize. I'm going to delete the old BENU video review of the Talisman pen here and create a brand new one and get a medium nib so I can do a proper review of the Talisman in a medium versus, I guess, a fine that I now have as well. Apologies to BENU as well in terms of any misinformation that I put out there into the stationery community. Sorry about that. Really embarrassing that I didn't check. That's one of the most obvious things. I was so paranoid about my sending out misinformation on the channel that I went and checked every other fountain pen nib size here to make sure I got the right one, and I do. It was just a slip on this one for whatever reason. Some stationery toolkit updates. I really like the fact that I've got a platinum carbon black in my Kaweco. I love it. It's fantastic. I use it consistently and constantly in my traveler's notebook. And I love the fact that it's got water-resistant properties to this ink, which on my traveler's notebook, as you know, I keep two pens, one a black and one typically inked up with a few different fountain colors, but lately it's been largely a blue-black ink. And I've been eyeing the Sailor Seiboku ink. I was curious if you own that ink because of its water-resistant properties, I should say. That's why I'm curious about it. If you own that ink, I am curious what your thoughts are. Please let me know in the comments section below. Particularly how you like the color, how you like if it's got any shading, and what you think of the water-resistant capabilities of the Sailor Seiboku ink. Again, just let me know in the comment section below if you've got any thoughts about that. I'd love to hear from you on that. The other thing that I have been experimenting with these past 6 months has been my Hobonichi Desho A6 planner. And I've talked quite a bit about planners in the past and my planner setup, and there's a lot to like about the Hobonichi, and there's just some things that don't work for me, and I have decided that a 6-month experiment has been fun and interesting, and I think I'm going to gravitate away from it and switch back to my tried and true planner setup, which is my weekly memo in my traveler's notebook. So I guess just bit of an announcement in an upcoming video. I'll be doing an in-depth look at the Hobonichi A6 Tesho, why I liked it, and why I'm switching away from it. It's a great notebook, great quality paper, but when it comes to, I suppose, my brain and how I tend to do planning and my look at weeks in terms of a schedule and an agenda, it doesn't quite fit in that. Stay tuned for that video. That'll be coming up here shortly. And I we'll talk about why I'm switching away from the Hobonichi A6. A couple of other announcements with respect to the stationery channel here. I have been afforded the opportunity to meet some amazing people through this channel and this community, and I just want to say a heartfelt thank you for that. I think it's just so cool that stationery encompasses such a wide variety of people, and there is just such a friendliness within the community. I think that is hard to come by generally, and I just really enjoy that, so thank you. One person, Alexandra, reached out to me and came up with a great idea on doing an interview video with each other with respect to fountain pens and stationery, so I thought it'd be really fun to share that when that's ready as well. That is upcoming. Suppose the last slight update in my stationery toolkit, and it's small, but it made a pretty big difference, is in my Olive Traveler's Notebook video setup. I had talked about how I was using the TWSBI 580 here in my setup. However, I decided to pull the vanishing point off of my Hobonichi A6 and put it back onto my Traveler's Notebook regular setup here. I love the vanishing point pen. It's one of my favorite pens. I love that it's a clickable fountain pen or retractable fountain pen. This one in particular is an extra fine that was slightly Frankenstein butchered to write. There's a variation from extra fine to fine to medium, so there's a tiny bit of a flex, and depending on the angle, it writes in a different variety of styles. But that is my new Traveler's Notebook setup, and this is going to stick, I think, for quite some time. The Kaweco, the vanishing point on my beautiful Olive Traveler's Notebook. Speaking of the Olive Traveler's Notebook, I was talking to some folks at the last Stationery Club meetup, as well as some of the commenters on my channel here have pointed out that they have been disappointed with their Traveler's Notebook olive color, which I thought was really fascinating. I didn't even know that was a problem. And what they were indicating is that they were getting more of a dark brown instead of that rich green color. And I think I must have been really fortunate or lucky. It seems like I've got a really nice green color in my Traveler's Notebook. It's even patinaing a little bit brown for sure, but there's hints of yellow underneath, which gives it that kind of contrast to result in a green. And so just something to keep in mind when you're looking out there with your Traveler's Notebook or potentially buying a Traveler's Notebook. Apparently there is some variation in the color of olive. You can get a darker version of it that tends toward a darker brown as opposed to, say, green here. I really have been enjoying my Traveler's Notebook olive setup. I have also gotten a lot of comments about the patina in my Traveler's Notebook and the camel here. I love the camel, I really do, very much so still. However, I just am very excited to see how this patinas over time. The olive and the color for me with the orange, I think it's just such a great contrast with also it used to be a natural color. It's faded with oils into a bit more of a camel English tan type of color on the clip here as well. Really enjoying my Traveler's Notebook, which has become, once again, always has been a mainstay in my stationery toolkit, the Traveler's Notebook, but it really has cemented itself as my go-to notebook for everything on my day-to-day when I'm out and about, where I'm hanging out with folks. I usually have it on the table in front of me, and I am taking notes and writing observations about things that are going on around me. Last thing I thought I'd talk about, I love reading books. I've got a little bit of time off here in the next few days from work. One of my favorite things to do is read, garden, journal, hang out with people, and I am really particularly excited of picking up this book. This is The Wager. This is by David Gran, and I've been wanting to read it for some time, and I finally became available at my library here. This is a tale of shipwreck, mutiny, and murder. It's a nonfiction book. It was on the New York Times bestseller, if that means anything to you. I love historical books generally, and for some reason, well, I wouldn't say some reason, it was inspired by Alfred Lansing's Endurance. It's a wonderful book about the Shackleton expedition, and it's written in such a way that you're invited into the adventure and the peril of the adventure and the audacity of what they were trying to do, what they got themselves into, and how Shackleton got himself out of a very precarious situation in Antarctica. And for some reason, I love reading about expeditions that go wrong, especially with ships. And the irony of that is I'm quite terrified of the ocean in particular. Funny that I read books about that and get a big kick out of ship expeditions that go wrong and all the politics on the ship take place when things do go wrong. So I'm very excited about reading this book here. The other one that was recommended by a commenter is What I Talk About When I Talk About Running by Haruki Murakami. I just finished up another one of his books, South of the Border, West of the Sun, which was a surprising read for me from Haruki Murakami. I hadn't read that one before, and I would say very different from his typical style. Still lots of elements of his style in there, but more of a kind of a serious look at life. I won't spoil too much about it, but it's effectively about an individual who is struggling to connect at a deeper relational level based on a young love. I'm not typically a fiction reader, but for some reason this year I've been picking up more fictional books. And this one is another one that intrigued me. This is by Emma Donoghue. This is Haven, and it's about a few folks in Ireland rowing out to a nearby island and all the things that take place there. And so I am curious about my exploration within fiction again. I love nonfiction, and I remember gravitating away from fiction because I really wanted to just spend a lot of time reading and studying and learning. But fiction has reintroduced itself in my life, and I'm very particular about fiction as well. When I was younger, much younger, I used to read a lot of horror by Stephen King. Whether you like Stephen King or not, there's no doubt he has a way of setting up frameworks that really are insidious and get in your mind with each of his novels and stories. I remember I can't even remember what the last Stephen King novel I read was, but I remember setting it down and going, okay, maybe this is enough King reading, because it's keeping me up at night thinking about things that I wouldn't have necessarily thought about thinking. So I gravitated away from horror, although it's really piqued my interest yet again recently, and I don't know why. In terms of going back into horror, I don't know if I'm going to explore horror. But other fictional books that I really like are, the Lord of the Rings series, The Hobbit. I've talked a lot about Dune and how my love for the Dune series, science fiction. I haven't been able to pick up a copy of Red Rising yet, which is another science fiction series, so I'll be doing that. And so I think, well, now that I'm talking out loud about my love of my reintroduction of fiction, I think it really came from watching the Dune movies and picking up my old Dune books, dusting them off and reading them again. And the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan, which I haven't finished. There's 14 books in there, and I think I've gotten up to book 3 or book 4. They're gigantic books. Watching the movies sparked a reinterest in fiction, so I went back into science fiction, and now I'm exploring within fiction again, which I really enjoy. Don't get me wrong. I like to be very selective of what I spend my time doing, just because it seems like I've got young kids. It seems like when I wake up, I've got a couple of hours in the morning where I'm able to record videos like this, and then it's just a mad dash into the rest of the day with everything that's going on, and exhausted, falling into bed at night with a novel or sitting in my reading chair. Fiction, I find, is can be hit or miss, and you never know what you're signing yourself up for. So I'll let you know if I like this guy here as well. Thank you all for joining me today. Take care. Have a wonderful day, and bye for now. And happy Canada Day.